Today, we're going to talk about the one thing that connects something like the American Revolution to, well, the phone in your pocket. And that one thing? It's leadership.
Yeah, I know, it sounds like a weird question, right? But the answer, it actually reveals this timeless truth about what it really takes to achieve something incredible. So let's dive in and see what that is.
So, we're actually digging into an article from Shasta Unfiltered for this one. And what they do is pretty cool. They use these case studies from early American history all the way to modern business to make a really strong point about what makes organizations either succeed or completely fail.
Okay, so first things first, let's get on the same page. This source we're looking at, it defines leadership as, the art of guiding people toward a shared goal, a shared vision, to get to these amazing outcomes. And it's basically presented as the essential ingredient. Doesn't matter if you're building a country or a tech company.
So right off the bat, the article breaks leadership down into two basic types, two really different ways people come into influence and power.
So, on one hand, you've got what they call selected leaders. These are the folks who are formally chosen. Think John Adams or Thomas Jefferson. But then, on the other hand, you have emergent leaders. These are the people who just kind of rise up on their own because of their amazing ideas or their actions, people like Thomas Paine or Nathaniel Greene.
And what's really interesting here is you see the need for structure, right? You've got guys like Adams and Jefferson who were actually elected. They were officially given the power to take all that revolutionary energy and funnel it into an organized political movement.
But, a formal structure just isn't enough on its own. You also need those sparks of genius, the ones that come from the outside. I mean, look at Thomas Paine. He wasn't elected to anything, but his pamphlet, Common Sense, was so powerful it completely changed how hundreds of thousands of people thought. And then there's Nathaniel Greene, a self-taught general who turned out to be one of the best strategists of the entire war. These guys filled the gaps where formal leadership just couldn't reach.
Okay, so you've got these two types of leaders, right? The selected ones and the emergent ones. So, how do you get them to work together? Well, you need someone in the middle, a central figure who can unify everything.
And that's where George Washington comes in. He's really the perfect mix of both. On one hand, he was formally selected by Congress to lead the army, but he also emerged as what they called the indispensable man, just through his own sheer will, holding the army together during the brutal winter at Valley Forge and really becoming a living symbol of the revolution.
And this quote, wow, it just perfectly captures the kind of leader he was. Think about it. After winning the entire war, Washington just gives up his power. He could have easily become a king, but he chose to be a citizen instead. That one act absolutely stunned the world. Even his enemy, King George III, had to admit how huge it was.
But this isn't just some dusty old history lesson. The article makes a really compelling case that this exact same dynamic, the need for that one unifying person, it plays out all the time in today's business world. I mean, take someone like Elon Musk. The article points out that his own co-founder at PayPal, Peter Thiel, literally thought he was crazy for pouring his money into starting SpaceX and Tesla. But it was Musk's unique vision and his willingness to take those huge risks that let him build this interconnected empire, kind of like a modern Washington, coordinating all these different efforts.
But here's where it gets really important. Leadership isn't a one-and-done thing. It's not static. As an organization gets bigger, and it doesn't matter if it's a country or a company, the leadership has to evolve right along with it. And if it doesn't, well, the results can be an absolute disaster. Apple is the perfect modern example of this. You had Steve Jobs, right? He was the classic emergent leader, a total visionary who basically started a revolution. But when he was forced out, the company started to stumble. They needed him back. But then, after he passed away, a totally different kind of leader was selected to take over. Tim Cook, who's an absolute genius at operations. He took Jobs' incredible vision and scaled it up into the global powerhouse it is today. It just goes to show you, different stages need completely different leaders.
And you see the exact same story over at Microsoft. Bill Gates, the brilliant founder, but under his successor, Steve Ballmer, the company just stagnated. They missed massive changes like the shift to mobile phones and cloud computing. Then in comes Satya Nadella, another selected leader who completely changes the culture, pivots the entire company toward the future, and triples its value. It's a textbook example of leadership that can adapt.
So, the big lesson here? It's that adaptation is everything. Because as we're about to see, when leadership fails to adapt, when it gets stuck in the past, even the biggest giants can fall. And they fall hard.
Let's start with Kodak. This is such a classic cautionary tale. I mean, get this.
They literally invented the digital camera way back in 1975. But their leadership was so focused on the massive profits they were making from film that they couldn't see the future they had created. They saw their own invention as a threat to their current business, not the key to their future. And that failure to adapt, to be willing to disrupt their own success for something better, it led them straight into bankruptcy.
And then there's Blockbuster. Oh, Blockbuster. Their leaders had the chance to buy a tiny little startup called Netflix for just $50 million. And they said no. Apparently, they pretty much laughed them out of the room. And you have to ask, why? While their whole business was built on brick-and-mortar stores, and more importantly, on late fees, they just saw streaming as some kind of niche gimmick. They totally missed that the real innovation wasn't the technology, it was the convenience for the customer. A complete and total failure to see the writing on the wall.
And finally, Nokia. It's hard to remember now, but they didn't just dominate the cell phone market. For a long time, they were the market. But the article points to a really serious problem inside the company, a rigid culture that was basically built on fear. Reports say that middle managers were just too afraid to tell senior leaders bad news or to pitch risky new ideas. So even though they had amazing engineers, the company as a whole just couldn't move fast enough when the iPhone came along and changed everything. Their leadership built a culture that couldn't adapt, and ultimately, it cost them everything.
So, okay, we've looked at the American Revolution, at success stories like Apple and Microsoft, and at these spectacular failures. So what's the big lesson here? What's the final takeaway?
It really all boils down to this one idea. The article argues that true greatness isn't just about having one brilliant visionary leader. It's about building a leadership structure that can change and evolve over time. It doesn't matter if leaders are selected or if they emerge on their own. They have to be able to inspire people to act, sure, but they also have to be able to adapt to whatever challenges are coming next.
And the source wraps up by saying that these lessons, they're timeless. So it leaves us with one final thought to chew on. When you look at your own life, your community, or even your country, how do these core ideas about leadership apply to what's happening right now?